I'm 18. I'm a senior. I was a soccer captain on my senior year. I currently have a 3.5 GPA. The schools that are recruiting me are Merrimack, UMass Lowell, UMass Amherst.
Great grades, a star athlete. But this Somerville High senior, and many others like him, doesn't have the same options as his classmates. He's undocumented.
I was 13 when I came here. I adapted fast to the culture. I would do my homeworks every night. I was junior, senior, and then I realized that the situation about going to college is not just having good grades or being good at some sport.
Mitchell Freitas had a similar experience.
In my senior year, I kind of hit a little bit of a desperation point where I didn't know what to do, I had to apply to colleges, but I didn't know what colleges would take me because I was undocumented. There were no scholarships, little scholarships available to me, so I was kind of in a tough situation. The feeling of seeing all my peers around me, filling out their FAFSAs and just applying and getting the driver's license and getting all these amazing jobs, it was horrible. I remember that at times I would get home and I would break down. I would break down into tears, honestly, because I had worked my whole life, studied hard, worked hard to achieve something once graduation came around, and it was kind of like all the doors of the world were sort of shut to me,
Every year, 65,000 undocumented youth graduate from high schools across the country. In Somerville, the number might be a dozen, but it might be much higher. Students are not obligated to disclose their status. Undocumented students are not eligible for most grants or financial aid, or even in-state tuition. School counselor Ann Hertzberg tries to help those she can.
One of the hardest things I see every year is students who have done everything right in high school. They've taken the right classes, they've tried, they've excelled, they've reached out in the community, gotten involved, been captains of sports teams, started new activities, kind of everything that you would hope a student would do in U.S. high school sort of 4-year experience. And because of their status here, they're unable to find a place that will accept them and will give them the financial support that they need to be able to attend a 4-year college especially. Part of my job as a guidance counselor is helping all of my students apply for college. So when I start talking to my students, especially in the junior year, the beginning of senior year, I have to let them know that the college application process, and especially the financial aid process, is very different depending on their status in the U.S.
I think we need to ask them to resend it to you.
As an immigrant myself and as a counselor, it's hard for me to not believe in the American dream, that students can be here and be successful and work hard and achieve. And every time I see them doing everything that they need to be doing and not able to get that last step of getting a diploma, getting the recognition, the success, the scholarships, whatever that they deserve, it really, really breaks my heart.
I go to bed every night, think about it. Sometimes my mom sees me crying and then she's asked why, and I just don't like talking about it because I don't want to hurt my parents that they have been working so hard for me to attend college.
Students brought to the United States before 2007 can apply for DACA, which means Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. DACA recipients get a work permit and access to some financial aid.
Somerville has a large number of students that do qualify for DACA, the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. The students did have to be in the country prior to June 15th, 2007. So for the students that I work with, the vast majority actually came after that date. But in the city of Somerville and in Somerville High School, we had many students that qualified. I probably had about 10 students that qualified.
But many did not.
I arrived in the United States in January 27, 2009. So I was 2 years late.
Students like the soccer player are in limbo. If it passes, the DREAM Act would provide some relief. Congressman Michael Capuano backs the bill.
That I am a supporter of the DREAM Act, but I am a supporter of the DREAM Act pending passage of comprehensive immigration reform. If and when we can ever get to a decent comprehensive immigration reform, I'm hoping that the DREAM Act will then no longer be necessary. I look at it as a temporary necessity, as a bridge to where we really want to be.
First up, Justin, you have a report for us about a big decision that the mayor and the police department made, right?
That's right. On May 21st, Mayor Joseph A. Curtatone took a step that has been applauded by some, but criticized by others. On May 21st, Mayor Curtatone announced his plan to sign an executive order to end Somerville's participation in secure communities. Secure Communities is a program of the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agency in conjunction with local law enforcement in order to check the legal status of people picked up by police. Patricia Montez is the executive director of Centro Presente, an organization that supports the Latin American immigrant community.
And the message is that the city of Somerville cares about democracy, about freedom, that the city of Somerville respects basic human rights of all people, including undocumented people.
All of you are an integral part of this community, and we would be poorer, not richer in this community, if we allowed families to continue to be broken apart.
El vivir y trabajar en los Estados Unidos de manera indocumentada no es un crimen. El estar en este país de manera indocumentada es una falta de carácter administrativo. Definitivamente tenemos que luchar de manera colectiva para que se dé una reforma migratoria justa, que respete los derechos humanos básicos de las comunidades inmigrantes, especialmente las indocumentadas. Y el día de hoy estoy muy feliz.
We have made it our mission in the city to protect our residents and not to persecute them.
This executive order states that undocumented people are entitled to the same rights and liberties as all Americans, something the Supreme Court has consistently supported. As states like Arizona move to persecute the victims of our failing immigration policy, I think it's important for cities like Somerville to stand up and say that we too are not satisfied with the national immigration policy, albeit for...
The mayor's decision has caused controversy. Some, like commenters on local blogs, on Speak Out, or in this letter to the Boston Herald, disagree.
I think it's a very bold move. I think that it's by no means an easy move. He's already gotten a lot of political heat for it. I'm sure you've all seen the cover of the Herald, which I consider to be a badge of honor, so I can frame that and put it on the wall.
Next, we take a look at the issue of unaccompanied minors arriving on the U.S.-Mexican border. Some of them end up here in Somerville. On July 30th, Margaret Tague attended a meeting in Chelsea with representatives of some of the city's agencies who work with the child migrants.
More than 100 people, many from school systems and agencies, gathered to discuss how to best support the migrant children coming into the greater Boston area. Children who cross the border alone are known as unaccompanied minors. So far, in fiscal year 2014, more than 57,000 children arrived in the U.S., double the number in fiscal year 2013.
Hi, my name is Emily Lowenberg. I'm just wondering what happens to the kids who come over and they have family here, but the family is undocumented.
Most children are hosted by a sponsor family, who is often related to the child.
Everyone should know that as long as the family who wants to be the sponsor, who's trying to reunite with the child, has no criminal history, should be fine. So if they're undocumented, the majority of my kids' sponsors' parents are undocumented, that's fine, no big deal.
Somerville is home to at least 70 unaccompanied minors. In recent months, about 3 to 5 children have been arriving each week, according to local health care providers. Representatives of several Somerville agencies were present.
This has been happening for many years. However, the amount of kids now has sparked an interest in a lot of communities. Were caught by surprise. So we'll have strategic ways of welcoming these children, making sure they are registered in school, make sure they are vaccinated, that they get their medical health insurance, and they get the services that they deserve. One of the biggest issues at this moment is finding legal representation for all these children, because when they need to show up in court, they all have a court date if they were caught, and they'll go to court. However, in future court meetings, they will need legal representation. Unfortunately, there are a lot of people out there who are charging a lot of money, and it's not the case for these families. They really cannot afford.
Somerville is affected because we're really a community. We're a diverse community, and we do have adults that are undocumented living in our city. We have a lot of people in general, so it affects us because it's the heart of who we are. It's the heart of what Somerville has been for at least the last 20 years. You know, at the end of the day, I think we're all family. Me being a Christian person, I will say, we always talk about being, helping the least of these. We're supposed to stand up for injustices. And so I think, as Christians, we need to think about that as well. What is our role in this?
Officials estimate that another 30,000 children could arrive at the Mexican border by the end of this fiscal year. How many will come to Somerville, and will the Somerville public school system, health clinics, and agencies be able to support them? Reporting for Somerville Neighborhood News, I'm Margaret Tague.
The following week, on August 7th, hundreds of supporters of immigrants, and especially of undocumented, unaccompanied minors, went to a rally in downtown Boston. Our reporters met up with a contingent from Somerville.
This is a pro-migrant rally, specifically to sort of give light and shed light on the child migrant crisis that is currently occurring and has been occurring for decades at a time. I specifically migrated to the United States when I was 6 years old from Colombia, and at that point in time, my country was a country that was completely torn up, and it was a war zone. So I myself sympathize with what's going on with migrant children right now, and as a person who existed as an undocumented human being in this country, this is obviously something that is very near and dear to my heart.
As an immigrant myself, that has had the fortune of having an incredible educational opportunities, and I am a legal immigrant in this country with all what that entails. I want other people to have the same opportunities and to really leave America as a dream it is instead of a nightmare.
And then we're all going to be there to chant, to tell the world why we're here today and why we need the government to pass administrative relief and stop deportations for once and for all.
Eu quero estar solidária a essas crianças e também a nós, todos nós que estamos aqui, todos nós outros que somos imigrantes e não estamos documentados aqui neste país. E nós precisamos de um documento. Necessitamos um documento para trabalhar, para nós outros estudarmos, nossas crianças estudarem. Algumas das pessoas apoiam, mas eu creio que muitas das pessoas não apoiam essas crianças que vêm para cá. E nós outros temos que apoiar porque o país deles estão muito inseguros no país deles. Então eles precisam muito apoios nossos aqui.
Now we have an interview with two of the many people in Somerville trying to help the undocumented and unaccompanied minors who arrived in Somerville in recent months. Last summer, there was a lot of noise in the media about kids crossing the Mexican border, but since then, attention has mostly turned elsewhere. But the attention of Somerville's teachers and care providers has stayed focused on the city's newest residents.
Alex, Ann, thanks a lot for joining me here today at SCAT TV. I wanted to invite you down because over the summer we heard a lot about undocumented kids coming across the border. I guess we've always had kids coming here because they've got so many relatives or families that have been broken up that are getting back together. But there was a surge, there was a lot made of that, and I'm sure some kids have ended up here in Somerville, and I thought you could tell us a little bit more about that. Alex, I think you might have some statistics from the state level.
Well, at the state level, there's over probably 1,200 that have arrived in the last 8 months. It's slowed down recently because the Mexican government is putting military on the trains going north, and the conditions at the border are very bad.
And how many are here in Somerville? And do you know how many people are in the school system?
So it's a little hard for us to track exactly because there is some privacy and we don't want to ask families exactly what they've been through. But what we can tell is we have 89 documented cases since last spring of students coming. And of that, about 63 students are at the high school level.
Wow.
Now we head to the high school. Last spring and summer, the media talked a lot about unaccompanied minors fleeing violence in Central America. Over 70,000 young people are expected to arrive at the U.S.-Mexican border this year. Somerville has always been a destination city for immigrants, but recently, the flow of young people arriving here has increased. Since January, about 60 unaccompanied minors and many more young people who came with their parents have moved to the city. Reporter Yu Xiaoyuan and news director Jane Regan bring us this special report.
Allá está muy peligroso todo. O sea, allá las pandillas no lo dejan en paz a uno. La gente se está yendo porque está muy peligroso. Es más seguro que en El Salvador. Uno puede superarse más, tiene la oportunidad de poder superarse.
Today is Tuesday, October 28, 2014.
Mis padres viven acá, vivo en El Salvador, vivía y por parte de ellos vine acá a conocerlos. Yo le comenté a mis padres que como iba a cumplir mis 15 años, necesitaba estar con ellos, porque no es lo mismo estar con los padres que con los abuelos.
Rewrite your story. Okay? Escribirlo de nuevo. Ahora, paso final. Okay? Limpio. I'll give you another paper.
Uno no anda tranquilo caminando cuando va a estudiar, a comprar o algo, uno anda con temor que le salga a alguien, hacerle algo o algo. Entonces uno anda siempre con el temor y no anda tranquilo, pues por eso decide estar acá mejor.
Somerville public schools are home to hundreds of children from other countries. About 870 students, almost 20% of the city's public school students, are English language learners because they recently arrived in the U.S. 60 of them traveled to the U.S. alone or with other youth over the past year, taking great risk and often ending up in jail in southern Texas.
Bueno, ahí viene uno en carro, en bus, en tráiler. Es bastante difícil porque cuántos no han quedado muertos en México por X motivo. Y sí, cuesta bastante. Tuve una enfermedad que si más me muero, pulmonía. El doctor me dijo de que había sido por haber estado en las hieleras en Texas.
Pues el viaje no es tan fácil porque uno como de mujer, le voy a decir, se arriesga a todo, pero gracias a Dios no me fue lo que pensaba que era malo.
Sarah Davila is the director of English Learner Education. She oversees all the programs for students from immigrant families.
Unaccompanied youth is a particular profile of a student who is relocating to the community. For us, it's usually because there are family members already in the community. Oftentimes, those unaccompanied minors are undocumented. It's our responsibility to welcome every student into the district, and our approach is as soon as a student comes to Somerville, they are our students, period, and we don't need to know, and we're not interested in knowing about their residency status. We want them to be successful, and they come with particular needs, and we need to respond to their needs.
Box of cans. Box of cans. Box of cake.
Box of cake.
Box of coffee. Box of juice.
Box of juice.
Students take most of their courses in English right away, but they also take ESL or English as a second language. Alicia Sandeger is one of their teachers.
Oh, they have so many challenges. I mean, beyond just, let's say me moving to a different place and dealing with my, learning a new culture. Some of them are having to leave behind moms and dads and knowing they won't see them for many, many years. They're having to work so many hours a week, 40 hours, sometimes more than that a week. Beyond the challenges of sometimes they're coming with educations, like a 4th grade education. So they're being asked to do pre-biology, or they're being asked to do, algebra and geometry, and really put in situations where it is super hard. I mean, that's hard enough when you're not working 40 hours a week. But so those are a lot of the things many of our students are going through.
Soda.
Frijoles.
Okay.
Beans.
In English?
Beans. Onions.
Onion.
Beans.
No.
Beans.
Beans, good.
You're dealing with more than just them learning a language. You have to think about their whole self, their social and emotional component. How are they adapting, the kind of stages that people go through when they go to a new country and they're learning a new language and a new culture. So you're dealing with the whole student, not just what you're teaching them.
So now you're going to find cómo viene cada uno. So, rice.
Los nuevos estudiantes, cuando venimos acá los sentimos bien raros porque no sabemos nada de inglés y nosotros mismos los preguntamos y cómo vamos a entender si no sabemos en inglés. Entonces, pero hay muchas personas bondadosas aquí en la high school, como los profesores y algunos compañeros de nosotros. Hablan español y ellos los ayudan mucho a nosotros.
Y yo miraba a todos que, no sé, que me miraban raro y algo, pero no, todos me hicieron una amistad. Los profesores muy amables, está todo bien.
Puts the tea, then she puts the can of soup, then she puts the eggs, and todo eso. Okay?
Every year, the school system anticipates about 60 new students from other countries. But already this year, 48 students have arrived.
What we've done this year, knowing that we have the increase in beginner students, meaning that they're high school age, they may be 15 years old or 14 years old, but they've completed maybe 3rd grade of education in their home country. So we've shifted our cluster of courses.
Van excelente para mí porque solo llevo A y B. Entonces es de ponerle muchas ganas uno si quiere lograr lo que quiere. Y pues con la ayuda de los profesores, buenas personas, le ayudan a uno sale adelante.
Pues para mí la cosa más bonita es estar con mis padres, con mis hermanos y que me están apoyando en el estudio de aquí de Somerville High School.
Mi sueño es poderme graduar de high school, conseguir un buen trabajo donde lo cual yo pueda llevar una mejor vida tanto yo como mis papás y mis hermanos.
As the city's newest students start adapting to their new lives, they wanted to share some thoughts.
De que comprendan a la comunidad latina y miren cómo están las cosas en nuestros países, ya lo que es Centroamérica. Está en una situación muy difícil y pues les pido de que nos comprendan y nos den el apoyo que necesitamos, que nos ayuden, que no haya discriminación para nosotros.
Hay veces, tal vez piensan ellos que uno viene como a estorbar a este mundo, pero hay muchas personas que venimos a luchar por algo, por tener un buen futuro y por demostrarles que podemos, a pesar que somos unos niños, podemos aprovechar el tiempo que estamos aquí.
Jar of mayonnaise. ¿Qué más viene en un
New students are arriving almost every week. The school system is looking for bilingual volunteers to help with the homework and mentoring. For Somerville Neighborhood News, I'm Yu Xiaoyuan.
We withheld the names of the students in order to protect them and their families. If you want to lend a hand as a volunteer, contact the volunteer coordinator, Jen Capuano, at jcapuano@k12.somerville.ma.us. You can also help by donating winter clothing for teens. Call the Parent Information Center 617-629-5670.
On November 11th, I attended a talk about the roots of the immigration crisis. Two experts discussed the history of immigration to this country and looked at where immigration reform stands today. Afterwards, I sat down with one of them, Professor Aviva Chomsky. So before we get into the causes of this purported immigration crisis, I want to just talk about the word crisis. Is that the best word to use?
We heard the word crisis thrown around a lot last summer when we had large numbers of young people from Central America crossing the border. And I think that it's often used in the mainstream media is that somehow it's a crisis for the United States, whereas really it's a crisis. There has to be some kind of a crisis going on that's going to make children leave their homes, flee their homes, and take an extraordinarily dangerous journey to the border and across the border. So I think if we want to locate the crisis, we have to look into Central America for the crisis that's happening there. Another aspect of the crisis, though, is caused explicitly by our immigration law. That is, our laws have created a situation where hundreds of thousands of children are legally separated from their parents and cannot legally reunite with their parents. So that's a crisis too. But I feel like when the term crisis has been used, it's been more to refer to, oh, there's a crisis happening to the United States. All these children are coming. That's a terrible crisis, rather than thinking about who's actually suffering from the crisis.
We hear that people come to the U.S. for a free ride. What would you say to that?
The majority of the children who are crossing the border are not coming to get a free ride in the United States. They're coming because their parents are here. And their parents have been here often for many years or even many decades. And their parents are here working, and their parents are paying taxes, as everybody who works and spends money pays taxes. Generally, they're not taking American jobs that lots of Americans are fighting over. They're taking the jobs that nobody wants and that only somebody who does not have documents and who doesn't have access to the goods that society has to offer is going to be willing to take. They're jobs that have extremely unpleasant and dangerous working conditions, that are very insecure, that have terrible hours, that nobody who has another option is going to take, so they're left for the people who have no other options.
What are the historical and more recent causes to this movement that aren't discussed as publicly?
So I don't want to cover all of American history, although I could lecture you for an hour trying to answer that question. But some of the immediate causes of say, the migration of the last 2 or 3 decades are changes in the U.S. labor market and changes in the countries that migrants are coming from, and changes in the relationships between the United States and the countries that they're coming from. So let me just try to go over each of those really quickly. Changes in the U.S. labor market. We've seen a huge expansion of jobs at the lower end of the labor market. So migrants from Central America have always worked in these lower rungs, whether it's been in agriculture, in mining, in railroad building, jobs that are temporary, that are seasonal, that are unregulated, that are extremely dangerous and onerous. The loss of the manufacturing sector and the turning of our economy into a service economy has created a lot of very low-level service jobs that are frequently unregulated. A lot of immigrants work still in sectors like agriculture, but also in newly expanding sectors like home health care, like elder care, like landscaping, like fast food. The second thing is what's been happening in the countries that the migrants are coming from, primarily Mexico and Central America. And what's been happening there has been neoliberal reforms that have severely undermined social safety networks, and especially the ability of subsistence farmers to live on their land. And those have been imposed through free trade agreements like the North American Free Trade Agreement, NAFTA, or the Central America Dominican Republic Free Trade Agreement, CAFTA-DR. So many of the recent migrants are migrants from rural areas who have been turned into refugees by economic policies that make it impossible for them to survive on their land. If you look at Central America in particular, people are coming from 3 countries in Central America. They're not coming from everywhere in Central America. They're coming from El Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras. They're not coming from Nicaragua, Belize, Panama, and Costa Rica. And there's very clear reasons why migrants are coming from those three countries, and they have to do with US interventions in those countries.